And we're back. Welcome back to the Premier League prediction series. It's straight in to another game week as we approach now into game week 22. And before we get into today's episode, a quick reminder that European football finally returns for us next week, which means once again, 2 prediction videos coming out for you at the start of next week. Monday, we'll be covering all of the Champions League Match Day 7 fixtures. And then Tuesday, we'll be covering all of the Europa League Match Day 7 fixtures. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on either of those European prediction videos coming out for you next week. And don't forget while you're down there to drop a like on this video if you do enjoy all of these prediction series. Now let's look ahead to game week 22 by looking back at how we've got on over the last couple of weeks. I can tell you that the midweek fixtures, I was able to get 6 out of 10, no correct scores in the Premier League. So we are now firmly, I say firmly, back above 50% for Premier League predictions, 105 out of 209. But what has been a very good week in terms of predictions all round, with a couple of good Premier League game weeks and a very good FA Cup weekend last week as well, means that our season results are now 462 out of 805 as we look ahead to this game week in the Premier League and then the European fixtures once again. Because this is game week 22, I can also tell you that in the reverse of all of these fixtures in game week 2, I was able to get 6 out of 10. So hopefully we can get ourselves around that sort of score again this week, because I'm going to tell you right now, I think this is a very, very tough week to call. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Premier League game week 22 kicks off, as always, with the Saturday lunchtime kickoff between Newcastle and Bournemouth. And what a game we have for you here. Newcastle have won 9 in a row in all competitions, 6 in a row in the Premier League, and have only conceded 3 goals across those 9 matches in all competitions, with Isak scoring in 8 Premier League games in a row. However, Bournemouth are 10 games unbeaten in a row, which is actually longer than Newcastle's run because they actually lost the game before they won 9 in a row. So it's an unbelievable pair of teams coming up against each other in this early kickoff. And what makes it even more interesting is that 3 of the last 4 matches between these two sides have been draws, which includes a 1-1 draw earlier on in the season at the Vitality and a 2-2 draw at St James's Park last season. So there really isn't a lot to split between these two sides. Both of them, in terms of injuries and suspensions, have no fresh concerns coming into this one. But obviously, as we know, Bournemouth still lacking that out-and-out striker going into this. And I just think that with the balance of the two teams, with that being a key factor, with Isak absolutely flying and firing, I just have to give Newcastle the edge once again in this one. They're in the Champions League places. They deserve to be there, but Bournemouth are pushing so hard themselves. But I'm going to go for Newcastle. I'm going to go for a very narrow 2-1 win to them. On to the 3 o'clocks, and we start off with a relatively massive game here as well. It is Brentford taking on Liverpool, but unlike Newcastle and Bournemouth, this fixture has not been very close over the last few years. Liverpool have won all of their last 4 games against Brentford by an aggregate scoreline of 10-1. And that includes a 2-0 victory at Anfield over Brentford earlier in the season and winning 4-1 at the Gtech last season as well. So there is a lot in favour of Liverpool going into this one. However, Liverpool are winless in their last 3 games against Premier League opposition, and Brentford still find themselves the 3rd best team in the Premier League at home so far this season after that late comeback against Manchester City in midweek. Granted, Liverpool are the best side away from home in the Premier League this season, and they're actually unbeaten away in the Premier League this season. So I still think, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to see Liverpool continue to drop points, I think Liverpool have to be considered the really strong favourites for this one. In terms, again, of team news, it's pretty much as you were going into the last game for both sides. The only question is whether or not Diogo Jota has done enough to earn himself a starting spot after he made a really good impact for Liverpool against Forest last time out. I would expect him to do so, and with him on the pitch, I'm going to go for a Liverpool victory. And for the second time today, I'm going for a 2-1 victory. Second 3 o'clock kickoff sees Leicester taking on Fulham. For Fulham, it's now 6 Premier League defeats in a row, Whereas, for Leicester. For Leicester, it is 6 Premier League defeats in a row, if I said Fulham there. For Fulham, it is 8 games unbeaten in the Premier League up until that game against West Ham in midweek where they went down 3-2. And if we're being honest, they didn't particularly play very well against West Ham. Both of their goals were direct from Alex Iwobi crosses, where there was just some mishaps in the middle, which resulted in the ball going in the back of the net. And actually, when you look at their fixtures now, it's always how it looks once you finally come to a defeat at the end of an unbeaten run. Actually, Fulham only have 2 wins in their last 9. So they're not particularly playing that well either. They're grinding out results, but they're not accumulating points quickly enough. And again, Leicester getting absolutely hammered every single week at the moment. Both teams at the moment are falling victim to very, very sloppy defensive errors, particularly Fulham in that game against West Ham. So they'll be looking to put that right against the Leicester side, really struggling for form at the moment. Again, in terms of injuries and suspensions, no fresh concerns for either side. Leicester still missing Wilfred Ndidi, which I think has been the main reason why they're struggling so much, particularly in midfield over the last few weeks. And again, I just think without him, with how creative Fulham can be in those midfield areas, I've got to go for Fulham to get the result here. Leicester desperately need to find a cutting edge, because even though Fulham haven't been picking up wins, they've still been scoring a lot of goals. Meanwhile, Leicester really struggling to find the net at the moment. I'm going for a 3-1 victory to Fulham. And speaking of Fulham's defensive errors, West Ham United were the beneficiaries of those defensive errors in Graham Potter's first game in charge at the London Stadium for West Ham. And that Potter era is now going to carry on against Crystal Palace, who are a side themselves now unbeaten in their last 5 after a 2-0 victory over Leicester. And look, they are playing some very good stuff at the moment. Oliver Glasner's side is just starting to build up that momentum again. They're working their way up the table, but I don't think either of these sides are going to be happy with where they are at the moment. They are 13th and 15th respectively. Obviously, Crystal Palace are going to be without Nathaniel Chalobah. He has been stolen away by Chelsea. Some are saying in pure pettiness, because Palace refused to listen to any offers for Mark Gahey. More on that when we get to the Chelsea game. But it didn't seem to bother them in their last game, where they did, of course, get themselves that clean sheet, with Gahey himself scoring the second goal in that game. The question for West Ham is going to be who is going to play up front. Lucas Paqueta played there against Fulham, so will he do so again? They did score 3 goals. So potentially, they've obviously got Danny Ings available to them, and there's a lot of talk about Graham Potter bringing in Evan Ferguson, his former Brighton man. But even if they did, they're never going to get him registered in time for this one. I still think it's going to be a close one to call. I've not seen enough of West Ham under Graham Potter yet to say that they're going to do enough to get the result over Crystal Palace in this one, despite actually beating Palace at Selhurst Park back in August. I'm going for a 1-1 draw. That then takes us to the late kickoff on Saturday, and what a game it is. It is Arsenal against Aston Villa, the game that cost Arsenal absolutely everything last season with that shocking 2-0 defeat at home to Aston Villa, which ruined any of their title chances. To be fair to them, they did get their revenge at Villa Park earlier on in the season, an impressive 2-0 victory for them in that regard. But if Liverpool do beat Brentford, they will be 7 points behind Liverpool before they kick a ball against Aston Villa in this game. And obviously Liverpool still have that game in hand as well. So there'll be huge, huge pressure on Arsenal coming into this one if Liverpool do get the win. And let's be real, Arsenal just need to find a way to get the ball in the back of the net. Their last 3 games, Newcastle, Manchester United and Tottenham, their XG is absolutely miles over their 3 opponents. But defeat to Newcastle without scoring, defeat to Manchester United on penalties scoring just 1, and only beating Tottenham 2-1 when they absolutely battered them, coming up against an Aston Villa side that in big matches do defend very, very well. And Villa have won their last 3 games in a row. So there is a lot of pressure on Arsenal coming into this one. But I do still think they're going to edge it. Again, in terms of injuries and suspensions, none new ones to concern themselves from an Arsenal perspective. Maybe a few mental frailties in some of those players. For Aston Villa, the only absentee or the only new absentee is going to be Ross Barkley, but he doesn't start for them anyway, so I'd expect them to be at relative full strength coming into this. But I just have this little feeling Arsenal are going to nick this one. I'm going to go for 2-0 again. Villa have really struggled away from home. Granted, they did win their last away game in midweek, but that was their first win away from home in 6. And I just think Arsenal are going to edge it again. I'm going to go for 2-0, but watch this space. Villa more than capable of getting a result at the Emirates once again. That then takes us on to Sunday, and the opening game on Sunday sees Everton take on Tottenham. And unfortunately for Everton, it was new era, same old you-know-what for David Moyes' side as they once again failed to score in defeat to Aston Villa in midweek. For Tottenham, it's same old era, same old you-know-what, because Ange Postecoglou's side now has just 5 points out of a possible 27. They are absolutely stinking at the moment, are Tottenham Hotspur. Yes, they did get that good result in the EFL Cup over Liverpool, but, I mean, then they couldn't even put away Tamworth. And then they lose to Arsenal in a game that they should have lost by a hell of a lot more. The only thing going in Tottenham's favour coming into this is, firstly, they won 4-0 against Everton in the reverse fixture at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And, of course, Everton just cannot find the back of the net. And with Spurs' defensive injuries, it's a brilliant opportunity for Everton to get themselves a goal. But even though Tottenham have their defensive injuries, with Everton struggling so much, I still think Tottenham will win this game. Because even though they are struggling for points, in this really poor run of form, they certainly haven't been struggling for goals. And I think that is going to be the key factor here. I think even though Tottenham will give up chances, I still think they're going to create enough chances to score enough goals to put Everton away. So I'm still going for a 2-0 victory to Spurs. In terms of injuries, like we say, there's no news on any new or any returning Tottenham defenders coming into this one. For Everton, Armando Broja is yet again suffered an injury, which will see him miss a couple of months. So Everton desperately need support in those attacking areas. I don't think it's going to come in time for this one. I'm going for 2-0 to Spurs. Next up, it is Manchester United taking on Brighton. I am still very happy and very concerned after what I saw last night with Ahmad's incredible hat-trick in the last 12 minutes of the match to see off bottom club Southampton. For Brighton, they are playing some very good stuff once again. They've started to pick up victories again. A very impressive 2-0 win over Ipswich last night for them. And they've already got victories over Manchester United this season with a 2-1 win at the Amex. And in fact, 5 of the last 6 meetings in the Premier League between Manchester United and Brighton have gone in favour of Brighton. And Danny Welbeck came back and got himself an assist straight away for Jorginho Rutter last night as well. So even though Manchester United have had a good couple of weeks, the result at Liverpool, the result at Arsenal, and then the result last night, let's not kid ourselves. Manchester United were awful last night. They were awful. And they need a serious step up if they're going to get a result against Brighton. And Brighton are going to be watching the highlights of that Southampton game, knowing that if they sit off and counter Man United, the likelihood is they're probably going to get the victory again. And even as a Manchester United fan, I have to look at this game being realistic and say, do you know what? I just don't fancy us to get the result here. And Brighton are so good against us historically. So I'm going to go for a Brighton win. I'm going to go for 2-1 to Brighton. Obviously, I expect United to win. As a United fan, I expect us to win. But I just look at this fixture and I think we're going to lose 2-1 to Brighton. Final early game on Sunday sees Nottingham Forest taking on Southampton. It's 8 games unbeaten now for Nottingham Forest. Their 7-game winning run came to an end with that 1-1 draw against Liverpool. An incredible goalkeeping display from Matt Sells in that one to keep Forest in it towards the end of the game. For Southampton, it's 8 defeats in their last 9 Premier League games. And to be fair to them, it was a much better performance at Old Trafford last night. But it's just symptomatic of how they've played this season that even when they put in such a good performance, they end up losing 3-1 and still sit rock bottom of the table, a long way away from safety. And let's be realistic, the way these sides are playing this season, Nottingham Forest away, certainly a much, much tougher prospect than coming to Old Trafford, and they didn't do anything at Old Trafford in the end. So, for me, it's definitely Nottingham Forest's game to lose. What's worse for Southampton is it looked like Tyler Dibbling picked up quite a bit of a knock in that game. Hopefully for him, it's an impact injury and he can come back for Sunday, but he didn't look like he was moving very comfortably at all when he came off. No fresh concerns for Forest. I expect them to win again. I'm going for 2-0 to Nottingham Forest. And then the final game on Sunday, the main event, is Ipswich Town taking on Manchester City. A furious Manchester City, after that Christian Norgard equaliser for Brentford, ended their little mini resurgence. But for Ipswich Town, their little mini resurgence was ended as well with their defeat to Brighton last night. It's been a tough few days, I'd imagine, for both of these sides coming into this. Erling Haaland has just signed a new bumper deal, though, for Manchester City, a 9.5-year contract. So they seem to feel pretty confident that they can tie him down in the knowledge that maybe they're not going to be receiving all of these charges that have been lobbied at them, but that's a story for another day. When I look at this fixture, I have to assume City are going to win this. They won the game at the Etihad 4-1. They are playing better football. Okay, they conceded those 2 late goals against Brentford, and with that in mind, I will give Ipswich a goal. But in terms of their attacking output, they are looking closer and closer and closer to their best. And against an Ipswich side that are really struggling defensively, I have to go for Manchester City once again. I'm going for a 3-1 victory to them. And then the final game of the game week, it's the Monday Night Football. It is Chelsea taking on Wolves. And it is now 5 games in a row in the Premier League without a victory for Chelsea. And that result has meant that they have now slipped out of the top 4. Reece James's late equaliser, enough for 1 point, but not enough to stop them dropping out of the top 4, because the side that has gone above them is Newcastle United, who did so by absolutely, I'd say, obliterating Wolves 3-0, but I think that would actually be a little bit harsh on Wolves, because Dubravka was forced into an awful lot of saves in that match, and maybe the 3-0 scoreline was a little bit flattering in terms of Newcastle's favour, because Wolves, from what I could tell, did actually put up a good performance in that game. And look, this could be a really interesting match. It was 6-2 at Molineux in favour of Chelsea, but it's also worth noting it was 4-2 to Wolves when these two sides met at Stamford Bridge last year. So the one thing I'd expect from this match is goals in before a boring Monday Night Football 0-0, but I'd be very shocked if we see that. In terms of team news, no sort of fresh concerns for Chelsea or for Wolves coming into this one, but we mentioned it earlier, the big question for Chelsea is Chalobah going to go straight back into the Chelsea first team? Because he was playing every week for Crystal Palace. They recalled him because they say they wanted to use him for the second half of this season. If he's on the bench, I think Chalobah is going to be finding himself pretty annoyed at that whole situation. But for me, I think it's going to be an interesting one. I can see this one going a very, very long way towards the end. I can see there being late goals again in this one. But I still think Chelsea are just going to edge it. As I said, high scoring expected. I'm going for 3-2 to Chelsea. And that is going to be it for today's video. As always, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back with my post-match reaction to Manchester United against Brighton on Sunday, and then we'll be doing all of the European predictions on Monday and Tuesday. So a final thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you very soon.